almost 12, so we'll start. Thank you all for coming. My name is Marek Madej, and today I will talk about character design for games. I'm senior concept artist, and sorry, I'm a bit stressed and get confused once again. My talk for today will be basic fundamentals behind character design, things that probably make designs in games believable and interesting, and challenges that we need to overcome while developing The Witcher Wild Hunt. But before I will jump into the subject, I will talk a bit about my role at CD Projekt RED, and as my job title might suggest, I do various things considered as concept art, from basic simple sketches to more detailed images, basically providing visual ideas for art director to choose from, or solving visual problems if there are any. And I think what concept art really is and what is it for. What's the difference between concept art and illustration? Because for me, even people that doing that stuff for a living sometimes have problems explaining what concept art really is. And from my perspective, concept art, the main difference between concept art and illustration is that illustration is the final product that viewer actually see. And if viewers see actually a concept art is something that wasn't necessarily the main purpose of concept art. Basically, concept art is to serve the bigger project, and it's about showing some ideas visually. It can be object, an item, a character, or mood. Whatever is needed for the project. It's also for the searching as many possibilities as we can to choose the best ones. And the thing about the concept art is not necessarily about making pretty images, because I could focus on the super dynamic pose, interesting light, and make super great rendering, but at the end of the day end up with a mediocre design. And from the perspective of the bigger project, that doesn't make much sense. And here I have 3 different examples of the same character. And the main obvious difference is between the last one and the first two, because the last one is basically a rendering, and the first two are painted. But for me, the most important difference is between the first one and the last two, because the first image was actually focusing on the design, and the last two they were more about showing pretty picture. And the case here is, if you can design while making nice looking image, it's great. But it's better to solve one problem at a time and not bother with the light or color, sometimes even anatomy if you struggle with that kind of stuff, and just focus on creating nice, interesting looking character. But whenever we start to work on a project, we also need to think about what project we actually work on. And because of that, many things may be changed and different. Here is an example of design that was actually originally made for the Wild Hunt, but was also used in the Witcher Battle Arena, which is a MOBA game. And as you know, the proportions are different, and there is the reason behind that. Because if we would approach design a character for a MOBA game where there is isometric camera angle, we would lose a lot of details. Those proportions are different for the readability. If you can spot a Witcher medallion, which is a crucial item for the Geralt, it's bigger and in different position than it originally was. It's because if it would be the same size as in the original design, it would just get lost and would not be visible. But whenever we also think about the project that we're working on, we also need to think about the audience and who will be looking at this. Because if we work on the project that is aimed for kids, we will probably focus more on bigger shapes and colors, make them brighter, and not necessarily about functionality and that kind of stuff, which is more important probably for mature audience. And as we know, like, for me, when you work on any project, it's also important to know the main theme of the project. As we know, The Witcher is a fantasy game, highly based on medieval stuff, but it's not a historical game, so it's hard to expect that everything will be accurate and appropriate to the stuff that was using in the history or in medieval times. And for me, main theme is also for setting up what actually fits your project and what is out of place if you actually need to use it. Because we had this case with the Wild Hunt, for example. Those are elves from different dimension, so we did it on purpose. We tried to make them look different and out of the world of Witcher. But why we actually focus so much on the historical stuff? And as I said previously about the audience, that it's targeted to more mature audience. Mature audience, basically, they are more critical and they like to ask questions, and sometimes if it doesn't look like it's working, it might be it might make this impression that it's like childish. So by using stuff that is was used in the past and it was working back then, we have some of the design problems actually solved, and this is how those things were actually working. But still, I said that we have this main theme for setting up what fits the project and what's not. You can say that you have an art director for that, but it's still helpful for the concept artist to limit the possibilities that you can use in the designs. And here we go into the reference and inspiration, because like I talked about these medieval things, and reference and inspiration is basically at the beginning probably of any design process. Everybody is doing some research, and even if you don't have any physical or digital reference or inspiration, it is just in your mind, because you will remember something, and most of the time you just all of the things that you do creatively, it's based off something that's or maybe at the back of your head. But here there is this basically topic that for a long time I was approaching this part of design a wrong way, because I was focusing and I was too inspired by stuff that was actually interpreted, like remixed, and I didn't search deeper for like more original stuff that actually working. And here we go to the main issue here, which is actually understanding what you are working on and what you are designing, because this is crucial when you want to try design something that is believable. You actually know what you design, because it will help you to show it visually, to search for proper and original reference that later on can be also translated in a proper way. Because if you don't know, for example, how armor works and why they look in that way, you may just take things from the reference that are not that much important. And here we go to another challenge, which is balancing between visual appeal and functionality, because it's super hard to reach the extra level of those. But from my perspective, great design, it's always about balancing them accurately. There are some projects that are stylized, they don't need that much functionality actually, and it's okay. But when you do project like Witcher, which is more realistic, you need to have this functionality to make it look like something that it's very believable actually for the audience. And functionality, sorry, I have this blackout in it's because of the stress, and maybe I will get here, because here we go to the actually visual appeal and to the shapes, which are important for many reasons. For the concept artists, when they start to work on, like, there is a big chance that most of the people start with silhouettes, and it's because of those reasons actually, that shape makes visual variety and can help you make something interesting. It's important to make a readable silhouette for a concept artist to be able to draw or paint a creature or character in a way that will be readable for like 3D artists. We have this example on the left side, which is, we probably can get what the creature is, but it's hard to read the whole silhouette, and it would be super painful to paint it, because you would need to paint super accurately the light and the forms. On the right side, you can actually paint light in a not super detailed and not super appropriate, and it would still be readable. But what is like the shapes also for? You can basically put the viewer attention where you want to. If you have like, if I have that kind of example, I cannot judge where you probably look at if you look at the screen. But if I will do just something like that, there is a pretty good chance that firstly you will look at the circle. And with visual variety, when we started working on the Witcher armors, we had this issue that in the previous game, armors were looking basically pretty great, but they were too similar to each other, and we wanted to achieve much bigger variety, even on the level of only upgrading the armor. And even if the final result is basically totally different from this stuff, it still shows the thinking behind, at least at the beginning, behind creating those armors. But when we have actually already established shape of the character or creature, we have another challenge, because we may actually accidentally change the whole look of the creature or character by just using certain details. Or here is pretty much popular example of like two lines that are actually equal, but most of the people that don't know this example would say that the bottom line is actually longer than the upper part. And here is much more accurate for concepting example, how you can actually make proportion look different by just adding certain details. It's helpful, especially if you don't have that many sizes of character, or maybe just one. On the left, we can see that by adding certain cut in the value distribution, we can change the overall look of the length of the legs, where on the right side, legs looks just shorter because we put this cut a bit lower. And here we are going to another challenge, which is value and materials. And value is super helpful when you want to make character interesting and to look interesting even on like middle range, because silhouette would be to make characters interesting from the distance, but like proper value distribution would help you a lot with making character interesting from basically any distance. But on the top of that, you can also use different materials. It would help you make characters look more interesting, visually, and they just add more variety in the terms of details. It's also helpful when you actually don't want to use different values. For example, you want to make only black character in terms of clothing, and in games that would be looking like pretty boring, and most of the time if you have only one material it will probably look like rubber. So you can add different materials while still having only one color and make the character overall looks interesting. We also was thinking about it when we worked on the monsters. It's harder when the monster don't have any attached items or whatsoever, but when we had an opportunity, we tried to differentiate materials on the monsters as well. And here is color, which like for me is one of the hardest things to deal with. And there is a couple of topics here and challenges. Here you can see some of the possibilities that we did while designing the Trees Marigold. And the thing is, like, color is something that's at the end, one of the things that it's at the end of the development of a character. Maybe before all of those things like adding animation only for this character and so on, but it's hard to predict how certain colors with certain materials will look like in this particle or engine. So most of the time they are just tweaked. We choosing a certain color palette, and then we are tweaking the colors or even changing them sometimes in the engine. But here, the color can be also helpful with also catching the viewer's attention at certain point, and you can even use them both with the shape to make it even stronger. But color is also helpful when you want to work on this variety and consistency. We had this challenge here because we needed to create a bunch of different clans that would feel that they are connected together. And we did a lot of different assets, but we couldn't afford to make certain assets for every single clan. So color was helpful here to make feel that certain group of characters are actually from the same world, and by doing that we also could achieve variety, because we could a bunch of different color palettes, and that's why even if we had limited amount of assets to use, we could do separate clans. But color palette is also important in terms of harmony, because on the left side, the first example is something that has super boring color palette. It's monochromatic. Middle example is something that it's super saturated. It's like the vibrance is it's super hard to look at it, And on the right, even if the color palette is not super interesting, it's not as boring on the first example, and it's not that painful to look at as the middle example. And here we are going to detail and scale. And it's pretty important in terms of detail, what's the distribution of detail, because you can put the details in a place that it will be never visible. So it's important to know how and where the characters will be visible. And because of that, the most detailed elements in our game are the main characters, because players spend a lot of time in dialogues and cutscenes. But from my perspective, the most interesting case with the details will actually scale, when we want to show that something is bigger than the normal object. And when we have like only the one element, it's hard to judge what size it is. So we need this context, and by adding something smaller, we can show that something is bigger. And here there is a particular example, which is Cyclops from our game. I will talk about it with the screenshot from our engine, because it's more visible. And we added a bunch of different smaller objects that maybe could be helpful with showing the scale. But he has this one element on this left arm. And basically it's one of the armors that some of the guards in Novigrad actually using. And we use this asset not because it was cheaper to reuse some assets, because the modeler needed to resculpt this particular armor, but it was actually for showing this scale, because this element is the same size as the regular armors for the people, but it's also for making this impression that all of those things, like these guards and these Cyclops, are belonging to the same world. And adding this smaller story that maybe the Cyclops killed one of the guards and basically used his clothes to make something for himself. And here is actually the armor that even Geralt can use, but with the different colors. Another example of details and scale and the challenges that we had was basically Ice Giant. It was my first character creature thing that I was working on while working on The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. And the case here was that the final design actually changed during the process. So even if you have accepted design, many things can change because of the reason. And here was that when I started working on this, there was certain we had certain size in mind, and by having this certain scale, I was using certain details to make similar things, like with the armor of the Cyclops. So I was using a lot of shields and that kind of stuff, actually bucklers, because they are not that big. But there were 2 points here. One, that our director decided that this dude would have too many problems making those things on his legs because of his huge arms. And the second thing was that the scale of this creature actually changed, because we, on the level of prototyping, which is also important while designing creature for games, we realized that it doesn't feel big enough. It just, when we were fighting with this creature, he looked just like a little bit bigger character. So we needed to rescale him and make him even bigger. So those details actually didn't make any sense. Another challenge in terms of details is actually asymmetry, because you want to distinguish main characters and secondary characters, or like society background characters, because if everybody would be special, nobody is special. So we're using basically symmetry to achieve this effect of special characters. but we try to not doing it in a too obvious way, because we could do totally asymmetrical design on the character or making super big one of the shoulder plates, but in real life it doesn't make much sense, because if you look at the human body from the distance, it looks totally symmetrical, but if you look at close-ups on the details, you can see that basically you have some smaller details that makes you asymmetrical. So in my opinion, it's good to think about designing character in that way, because you don't have that many asymmetrical designs for clothing, or there were not that many armors that were asymmetrical. If they were asymmetrical, there was purpose behind it. For example, like on the tournaments, because they were fighting only on one side, so they had extra protection on this side. But what you can do to add this like not so obvious asymmetrical details. For example, you can make symmetrical design of the clothing, but I could roll up one of my sleeves or add certain detail as watch, or with this example as Geralt, he had additional, like he has this super huge belt that is basically going across his body. But at the end of the day, the big issue that I didn't realize that much for a long time is actually technical limitations, and those things that maybe how to say it, the more realistic project you have, there is the good chance of that there will be more limits to in terms of design stuff. Here I have like certain example, which was our approach in terms of progression, because as I mentioned before, that we wanted to have like certain amount of variety and this feeling of progression, because it's super important for gamers, for players, to have that kind of stuff. The biggest limitation wasn't actually a technical one, it was just time. We couldn't afford to do 4 different base meshes or models for this character, so we needed to do it smart. And that because of that, we used some of the things that I mentioned before, like we changed the impression of every single level by changing values and changing materials. But here we had also those technical limitations that we needed to face. For example, some of those levels have 2 layers of armor, but because of the simulation, we needed to think about how to make it work, because if we would make 2 layers separately, it would be painful to make it look good in a game. So we decided to actually do those on the 1 layer with just a low poly. There was just this small detail that was showing that it's not flat, and it was basically working at it was glued those 2 levers together. And the second thing was also with simulation here, because originally this design shouldn't supposed to be like cutted on the side. It's supposed to be like long armor, and we had 2 different solutions here. We could make it shorter, but we didn't want to do it because it would change the whole impression and it wasn't looking that great. So we decided to add just these small cuts on the sides, and it happened that it helped a lot and make the whole design work in our game. And here we are going also to the working with 3D artists, because I also didn't realize for a long time that it's a big part of concept artists' work to help 3D artists if they struggle with executing your concepts, because when you do concept art, which is just basically something flat that's trying to look three-dimensional, you can fake a lot of different things, and because of that, sometimes it's hard to translate those things into 3D. But this example is something that we had already established design, and the character modeler was working on some details. Here it was hood, and he was basically simulating those one, but it wasn't looking in a way that we wanted to. And he could spend days for simulating another one and another one, but it would be too time consuming. For me, taking a screenshot and doing a paint over with several or different iterations of that, it was just maybe an hour, and then he had something that he could try to achieve in simulation without doing multiple versions. And whenever there is this case that something doesn't work, it's going back to concept artists at C Projekt, and concept artist is there to help solving those problems. Na zdrowie. But the most important thing at the end of the day is actually a story, especially in our game, which is a story-driven game, because story is something that will help you make your design feel that it belongs to a certain world that you want to show your audiences. Good design will catch viewer attention maybe for seconds, great one maybe for minutes, but story actually can catch viewer attention for like hours or even days. It can make people feel connected to the character that they see. And without this story, the character is just like a hollow image. But the story also needs those visuals, because telling stories in a proper way sometimes means you need to show things instead of actually telling them. And for me, that would be all. I hope that it was interesting, even if I get lost multiple times. If you would like to see more of my work, you can visit my website, artofmarekmadej.com. I would like to also mention that CD Projekt is hiring concept artists for Krakow department, so don't hesitate to visit our stand. If you have any questions, here is a couple of minutes to ask them.
Thank you, Marek, for useful tips. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that concept for some character can be only be created, the first concept, the shape or the first image, can be only created by artists, or anyone in the team can be involved in like creation of a character?
I don't know if I get with the question. You mean like everybody is involved, or everybody can work and do their own silhouettes?
No, I mean, for example, you have a programmer, okay, or you have a game designer who has the game designer or the story designer who had the image of some character in his mind, and he comes to concept artist and shows the silhouette or the first image. And do you accept this, or you think that only the artist can work on that?
Basically, every point of view is helpful, right? When you do, for example, when you do animation, most of the people know how human walk look like, and they can say if the animation doesn't look right or not, but they basically cannot help you making this looking right. And that's the thing with the design or image. Basically, everybody has their own taste, and they can say that like they like something or not. But at the end of the day, if everybody would be involved in the creating the same item or like the design, it would be never-ending story because you would change it forever.
But I mean the first idea of the character. For example, I'm making a quest about some, I don't know, for example, a witch, and I think that this witch should look like this. Do you accept this as a artist, or you think that okay, you just tell me how this witch would look like, and I will design it themselves? You would design.
If somebody in a company would approach me and would like to share his ideas, I would like get discussion with him, and if I would like didn't agree with something, I would just like try to explain him why I don't agree with this. But it doesn't happen that much actually. Like everybody is focused on his own work, and sometimes, yeah. Like
okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you again for the presentation, and I've got a question. Can you afford making changes of concept of some character or monster after you've already made a 3D model? The example of the troll, was it finished, the high poly, the textures, everything, and then you decided, well, it's not working at this point?
If most of the time, if that kind of stuff happens, it's not my decision, but it happens during the development. When our director decides that something doesn't look right, or sometimes actually when certain models were done at the beginning of the development, and we look at them for like a year or two, and we actually sometimes may realize that they are not looking great enough for the project, and then we decide to change it. So sometimes it happens, and we try to make things until they look the best they can for the project.
And can I ask, how often does it happen at this point?
It's hard to judge because it's an exception. It's not that often that something is changed. It would be hard for me to get any numbers, or it just happens. It's not super often, but it happens. Any other questions? You can, if you are shy or something, you can always grab me outside and just talk with me.